On behalf of everyone here and online, welcome to London, Rinpoche. We are so grateful that you have given space in your short visit to London for these blessed teachings. Hundreds have gathered together here and online to hear your teaching, and we're committed to listening with open minds and kind hearts. We're also very happy to know that you'll be returning next year, and we hope that you'll be able to stay a little bit longer and maybe travel around a bit. So there were 9 groups involved in the organisation, led with great skill and efficiency by Jamyang London. And thank you so much, Jamyang London, for your leadership. And thank you, Rinpoche, for creating the conditions for us to work together so harmoniously. Our success has brought us closer together. Thank you.
Om benza bhumi aho anchenze shiza shi om benza reki aho chi chakri ko yugi ko e utsuri galpori rab shalu papo lo zamboli new balance Draminien Lura Lupa Nayada Nayakshen Yudanda Lamchodro Draminien Dan Draminien Gira Rinpoche Riopa Samgeshing Duyuba Mamopa Yeloto Kolo Rinpoche Nobo Rinpoche Sunmo Rinpoche Lompo Rinpoche Lampo Rinpoche Tacho Rinpoche Mapo Rinpoche Techembo Yibumpai Girgma Tringwama Luma Gama Metopma Dukpurma Nangselma Drichabma Nima Dawa Rinpoche Duchurla Nampa Gelwa Gelsen Utsularan mi peljo punsum supama samwa mepa Sangshin idu angwa dida drinchen sawa danjepa chepe pelden lama dampanyam dan kepa duyan yun tunden pege da dunji la du seigneur metu kabje ranjud neljo Khandro Tseringma Rinpoche Belzam poche nye te pa chiempo zon chu jamu le pa ju we gundu shinkamul wagyu tuje druwe dundu she su so jenye kandatso druwa magyu nam ke taran yampe sem chen tam che la tutse washin pogyu ne jin ji lap tu so O Saji Pegi Joy Shing Me Jok Tram Ri Rab Ling Ji Ani Degen Padi Sangye Shing Du Mikte Ulwai Droko Nam Da Shing La Jie Pa Shoing Jie Tsun Lama Da Ba kienze choosing drink jita sampe in mala jage chuki chapa up to solidam guru ratna mendalaka niratayami. Sangye Chiran, Sangye Chanam La, Chancha Badu Dakni Kapsuchi, Dagi Chunyengi Pe Sunam Gi, Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho, Sangye Chiran, Sangye Chanam La, Chancha Badu Dakni Kapsuchi, Dagi Chunyengi Pe Sunam Gi, Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho, Sangye Chiran, Sangye Chanam La, Chanchu Badu Dakni Kapsuchi, Dagi Chunyengi Pe Sonam Gi, Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho.
강이 두제 예소에 다와 담제 방외제 담배 주네 된제 거담데라 차제로 돈이닌제 송던 주벨랑 치질센제 건진된정근 천남배모 된진자소 소원데서 다주 진제로 만난가다 냠베심젠 담제 동행 전진인단체 소베 산진지 공부 rinpoche 토베체 담배 최종본데 냥슬론차 나서 아니 참말로 다시 때래 주인 드린 땅에서 조샤조 어디 가지고
Kein Zufall.
알았어. 드림 조샤데 야고스가 고마스. 다 페제 나 남주시라 더나요 말와. 다 강다 가리 있으면은 집어면도 아니 땅아서 드림 루룩 쳐야 네 아니 다 정해서 점제야 한다 아니 다 시도 말에 아니 땅아서 로미진비 차니 심전 탐지 동해만 되봐 대완도 위니치 안에 땅아서 땅시 지야지 든지로지 차들이 대인자네 나는 아주 일이 좋아 가디 이나 아주 자와 가르치치와 있나 데니 심바장부 글로 넘버 타고지 심전 탐지로 펜바다 대화 치들라 주주 당야디 eng아서 글로 넘버 타고지 자기요리 대송자 아니 가서 드린 주딘 텔라양 아니 가서 땀시 지하이 고갑 델라티니 아니 잠블링지 로아르투 심전 탐지 아니 시데 아니 대완되바 동해만되바 대 탐지로 안데 심바정부 찬주기 심 용하쇼 대이체들라 아니 가서기 당시 체이 니시 체이세 안데리지 그로나로나.
So at the beginning, I recited a verse, the meaning of which is, throughout the reaches of space are limitless sentient beings. In order to liberate each and every one of them from that state, I myself must achieve the state. Can you hear? Yes, everyone can hear. My apologies. throughout the very reaches of space are countless individuals in the state of dukkha or suffering. In order to liberate each and every one of them from that state, I myself must achieve the state of complete and perfect awakening. In other words, to become Buddha. And for that, to that end, I'm now going to kind of practice the sublime Dharma. And this is the kind of opening verse that I read out. Now, with regard to the subject of tonight's talk, I'm not entirely sure what I'm supposed to be talking about, because usually I just kind of look at the people who come to hear me talk, and then somehow I'm able to communicate something with them based upon that cognition. But I would like, at the outset of our time together this evening, to emphasize that our gathering here is not some form of entertainment, something to pass the time. Rather, we should utilize the time that we have together to reflect upon certain points that I will bring up. We are all sentient beings. And as sentient beings, we have the characteristic that we would like to have comfort and well-being, to be happy, if you will, and to avoid its opposite, discomfort, pain, suffering. So all sentient beings have this idea. And so accordingly, when we are gathering together today to discuss the spirituality in general, the teaching of Buddha in particular, it is important to consider that with an open mind, I'm going to listen to these instructions and then put them into practice as much as I can. So with a mind of kind of an altruistic mind, if you will, a mind of a beneficial mind, if you will. Think that I'd like to kind of transform or to change my mind, to train my mind as much as possible, and thereby, both directly and indirectly, benefit all sentient beings. And just this attitude, in and of itself, is good for the world in general, and for all who we may come into contact with, whether it be directly or indirectly.
Laso, dini ngazo tan jocha ro zo di da ngazo lenji 동해 만들바다 대완대와 인장 dini di 아니지 대화 공도패와 당 아니 동해 매와서야지 탑 아니 시럽 당 아니 닝지 dini ngazo 피주 간지 시당나 야용나 제니 딘지 벽이 줘야지.
So we are sentient in a way that's obvious, but the characteristic of being sentient is, as I mentioned, the idea that, or the desire in a way, to be free of discomfort and suffering, and to acquire its opposite. And in order to get that, what we might call kind of peace of mind, so you might say the kind of path to that inner experience of peace, is something that can be developed within us through the cultivation of both compassion and understanding or wisdom.
Laso, deni tangazo mitse nangla aniji chuluk laya di kare nai, mirik laya di kare nai, ngaso yimba di mere. Tesongza ngaransogi nang di zambuling shivudi ngasogi chimzang nangre. 강바. 친자물이 리시부디 안가주기 강바다우지 침상 직배 강바다우지레스.
When we consider ourselves as a human being, regardless of religious affiliation, whatever kind of spiritual tradition we may or may not choose to follow, similarly, without recourse to an emphasis on kind of race, gender, whatever, if we can consider the human element We are all humans, human beings. And in a way, the world within which we find ourselves is like our house, and we're all kind of one human family, if you like.
An di hi ting la yun jo gi simjen te su changma lo wa. Ani nga su pinja nang ji. Ani jik jik la. Pe misi drewa yun jo. Ten jik jik la. Jik to gu tam sum yong su zo ba. Ani jik jik la ten ten ba dang. Ani jik jik la drel de wa zik cha do res.
If we consider the world, as mentioned, our environment, as like a kind of house or a home, if you will, and there within all beings, each and every one is like a relative, then naturally, thereby, we will develop a sense of closeness, a sense of family, if you will. The ideas that we are kind of separate or the kind of gaps that we usually adhere to will lessen.
Di changma lo wa. Ta ngui ni su no zi cha do ro was.
And in a way, this is simply the way of things, because as all human beings, we should, or rather we are creatures of habit, we are creatures of habit. And if we kind of get together, stay together, thereby we kind of develop a sense of family and familiarity.
Nga so la, ani so wa dewa gi long ju chawa kari zi ina. Teni, yin la ten dewa jang jang re do ro was. Ani ji ndoko na namdru, modra, ani ji langka, changma lo jurim zi tawa ina. Me ma bu jik la ten dewa. Yong su zo ba jik jik la ten dewa. Do dewa, che dewa. Deni zi gi ni chu zi inba de, nga zo ngo shi ya de, pe ki chen bu re wa.
In a way, if we consider ourselves as a singular person, and we may feel that I don't need anybody else, I'm quite content to be on my own. Well, is it really possible to be completely on your own? It isn't, is it? When we consider, for example, travel, whether it be by aeroplane, whether it be by car, bicycle, we travel on roads, the machinery that we use to travel are all put together, not by ourselves, but by lots of other people. And so, directly and indirectly, more's the point, indirectly, we have a relationship with others. It may be indirect, more's the point, it may be direct, but the point of the matter is we are individuals who, for our well-being, need to rely upon others. Everything is mutually dependent. We need, as human beings, to rely upon other human beings, to rely upon them. Indeed, we depend upon them for our very life.
Ta ngai ni su le tin zi yin ba yin na. An nga su gi jun du cho we to la. Nang su la an ji nga su jakap so so, mirik so so, chuluk so so. Teni ngai jakap ngai nang me. Ani ngarang silane an ji chok pa chira wa ra zi. Chu zimba gi jing ni sem de chu nam do yu ngo la shuk chen bo zin ro de yu ro wa.
So that's the nature of things. This mutually dependent way of being. We can pretty much understand that relatively easily. But is that the way things appear to us? It isn't, is it? When we look at the world and we interact with the world, whether it be directly or indirectly through the television, whatever, therein we find great kind of reasons to disassociate ourselves from others. For example, we can say, oh, I'm from this country, I'm not from that country. A sense of nationalism can kind of take over oneself and cause us to push others away. Similarly, when it comes to race, similarly when it comes to gender, similarly when it comes to religious or spiritual tradition, etc. There are myriad ways within which we can distance ourselves from others. And these ideas, when we give them credence, when we allow them to kind of take over our being, and we reify them and kind of adhere to them, then this causes us, our family, if you like, human family, if you will, to kind of fracture and fragment.
안 된지 이제네 안 가서 욕자 줘야 매버지 아니 강에 줘야 매버지 아니지 내가 대화 줘야 되는지 카두가 네 반준도야 하 레벨 강에 줘야 매버지 차디기로 봤어.
And so this kind of fragmentation, through whatever reason, is something that is, you could say, kind of troublesome in a way, directly and directly and indirectly. It causes us difficulty. It causes tensions. It causes a sense of being ill at ease. How is that to endure? It is something that is very unpleasant. It is something that kind of takes over our being to the point that even though we would like to have happiness, even if we're able to develop some kind of peace, it is something that is temporary.
제상 가서 너희들이 망보지 삼는 땅와 있나 nga la nga chu zubu de ina yang ani ji ni su ni subo la ya di nga chu phama yi khura ni lo drip de ba tini rimbe ye ani ji jeje mangbo ji la to ge dang sun de ne nga chu chanu che chibe thula darbi thula gebi thula se dinde ji nga ni ro de ya ji ro.
So again, if we look within, using the tools of introspection, we reflect upon ourselves and we say, I am this, I am that, I have this, I'm not that, etc. The idea of an independent identity appears relatively easily to us through the sense of familiarity. But if we simply look at the nature of things, we look at within, look at ourselves, we look at our kind of aggregation that makes up our being of body and mind. Well, if we look at the body, it is something that is the product of our parents. So we can say it's the kind of product of the fertilization of an egg through a period of gestation. We were born and we've grown up. And so in a way, the idea of being something independent is at odds with the way things actually are.
Deni mazu sim layaji namshi layaji ta khanda sim lawainada namshi layanada an dindi ta phami khurai dinala an denchine phami khurai denchine an mazugi ji chorwa detuk choryagi ta namshi lawainada sim lawainada ji logaji gribas.
Now when mention was made of our being as the umbrella term for the aggregation of body and mind. So we understand that the body is something that is, as mentioned, the product of our parents. But what about consciousness? This is something that is beyond the material, if you will. Mind, when we look for mind, what does it do? How does it function? It is something that is in the nature of awareness. It is aware of and feels, for example, pleasure, pain, and so forth. And this mind is something that relies upon the body, but is not an integral part of the physical.
대선자 아니 가서기 심 라야다 남시 라야디 아니 뭐니 제와 토마메바니 아니 마음발라 아니지 가르주다 탐마메바진 로데니 지리도와.
So consciousness or mind in and of itself is something that is in the aspect, if you like, of a stream. And where is this carried on from? We can say since it is carried on since beginningless time. So mind in and of itself as a stream is something that we experience and have experienced since beginningless time.
다 니가랑아서 서로와 디ting 박차 마무직 ngari 박차 마무직 단다 박차 샤사 마음발라 아니 박차기 땡로지 시사지 레디도와.
So as mentioned, consciousness gives rise to a particular kind of experiences, feelings, if you will. And these, through repeated experience, become somewhat habituated with them. When we develop a particular like or dislike feeling for this or that, etc. And this is something that kind of leaves an imprint on us. An imprint in the sense of driving us towards a particular thing, driving us away from another, etc. So this is what we call, in the Buddhist technical language, then the kind of imprints left within the mind.
다 이지 셰바 라고 말해 디기마 양 주전라오지 예나 도금에서는 된지 엉부라바티서 자와치디에 지칼라마 제바차디기도 와.
So when mention is made of consciousness, consciousness is something which is in and of itself quite subtle, but nevertheless, as the kind of body develops, kind of consciousness moves along with the body, and then what develops are what are generally known as the 5 sense consciousnesses, or the senses, if you like. And relatively, we can talk of 5 sense consciousnesses and 1 mental consciousness. The mental consciousness is something that is more subtle than the 5 sense consciousnesses.
대상 아니 지 류초르기 동행지다 류초르기 대화지 류 아니 지 샘소르기 동행지다 샘소르기 대화지세 차라 뭐지 용초야 된도.
And so, for example, if we take an object of the sense consciousnesses, perhaps we see something, and based upon the object that we see, then we'll have an experience of pleasure or pain. So the perception takes, the kind of characterizing, I like, I don't like, takes place within the mind, not within the sense consciousness.
덴디게 아니지 족자 치로 리자 왕부가디 아니 양 건다마 니 쿠로드 이지 남시티가라 파 드르도아.
So in a way we can look at and understand the kind of shutting down of the 5 sense consciousnesses when we sleep. When we go to sleep, the 5 sense consciousnesses kind of dissolve, if you like, or merge with them, the kind of innermost subtle mind, mental consciousness, if you will. It's as if, as the saying goes, they're in sleep mode.
제자 아니 가족이 지 치지 자와저지나 심감 원감 리바데 의니시 계속다트르기 유파 짐바른 제사이지 죽다트르지 여대바지 델라디니 셰바 이지 셰바 카르조르 왕모락바 셰바지 여대바지 디기 첼레지기 안에 아니 원감 리바세나 의니시기 시샤 동년지다 의니시기 아니 가족이 죽다트르 렉샤지 여대로와 원감 리바.
And so we can, as I mentioned, when we look at the world, we look at the objects of the senses, whether they be form, whether they be kind of tastes, smells, tactile sensations, sounds, whatever. So these are things that we perceive and that we kind of like or we dislike and we kind of go towards or we try to avoid, etc. But these are all objects that, generally speaking, linguistically, we can say exist kind of externally, in a way, and we can investigate them to see what their makeup is and how we relate to them in terms of mutual dependence, bringing about experiences as aforementioned.
대송자 다 심가 리바이 띵네 아니 가졸라 야제 땅야 시랍 카체야 지당 아니 디 원감 리바디 배주 간디스 지고메 아니지 가졸 So
we understand then the objects of the 5 senses, how they function. And then if we start to investigate the nature of those objects, we can kind of find out how they work together. We can understand their particular makeup, what is useful, what is not useful. We can start to put things together in particular ways, etc. And thereby we build what we can call the material world. So it's important to understand the material world and to develop within the material world, to develop it for our own well-being. This is something that is extremely important. I'm sure you'll agree.
당아서 니레 좋아 라와인드라 미치나라 아니 롭종이 남에 나서 용수 쪽어디 다조 원강리바이 초라 망한다지 차디기도 와 아니지 뭐 야제다야 뭐 죽주체야 아니지 조버서야 다 할리비 체통부지 원강리바디 체통부지 차이로.
And so if we look at our lives, as you know, we are persons who have at least kind of a basic education. And within our education, we learn certain subjects so that we can interact with the external world in a proper way. And through that interaction, we learn to kind of manipulate the material world. The point of this manipulation, if you like, or the development, if you will, of the material world is to make it better in a way, to make it more comfortable, if you prefer, to move perhaps a little bit faster, with a little bit more comfort, in a mode that is somewhat easier, etc. And so this then is the development of our education, the development of a person's education rather, and based thereupon, or rather therethrough, we have then the development or the betterment, if you will, of the material world.
딘디지 또그땀 다 딘디기 튠진 용수 쪽버지 아니 가지기 신노 뭐버지 야제 땅야지 여들와.
And so again, when we reflect upon this education, it is something that brings about then the betterment of the world. It is something that develops materially, if you like, the betterment of the experience of human beings.
이나양다 류소라 아니 디주이 뱀미시 핀도당 아니 가절로 그거 자침부지 차러와.
So whether this be in whatever the realm this may be in, for example, in the realm of medicine and so forth, this is something that is extremely important and we shouldn't be kind of negated or kind of left to one side.
세상다 딘디기 롭종 제사나라 아니 셈 장보 제사라 장보라야다 아니지 그 양보 라야 제바 첨보 닝제 첨보 학삼 첨보 아니 지 시디기 준당이 셈게 아니 가지고 롭종데 디나라 빼 뉴뉴렌도와 남주 롭종나.
So the point I'm getting to is when we think about education in general, education is something that focuses upon external development, the development, if you will, of the material world. But as mentioned, when it comes to introspection, to looking within, to looking at the one who experiences the material world, if you will, education to then bring about a peace of mind, if you will, to bring about a kind-heartedness, to bring about a kind of altruistic attitude, to make a person kind of decent, if you like. In other words, a kind of path to peace, path being then the experience of kind of peace, is something that has been rather left to one side.
내가 가서 롭종이야고, 되니 내가 야고, 아니 배샤 망보, 안 딘데 튕진 간듯이 좀마이나 이나양 아니지 나저기 아니 줄라 아니지 가지고 동해 참말로 매바조 투기면도.
And so, in this light, we educate ourselves, we educate our children and so forth. And the reason for this is we say if you're well educated, you'll get a good job. And why do you want a good job? Because you'll get a good salary. If you have a good salary, then what? Oh, then you'll be happy. Okay. So if that is the way of looking at the world, great. But it doesn't always end up with happiness as the experience of the person who has a good salary through a good job.
대성자 아니 대체 자치뭐 같이 여와 있나 아니 가서기 동네 라야다 아니지 가지고다 대차 라야다 셰당 라야다 디묵 라야다 낙심 라야다 뇌심 라야다 록다 차도 강다 남도 덴지데 용수 저바지 아니지 매바조 탑라 아니 배샤다 주너다 같이 자지 뭐였나 디게 매바 조 투기 면도와 빼샤 준노 제네 맞어 매바 조 투야 면도와.
Again, to use introspection, we think about that which really agitates us, agitates our mind, if you like. We can think of obsession with something, desirous attachment, if you will. Similarly, we can talk about revulsion, or kind of anger, pushing something away. Similarly, confusion, the idea of wishing to harm another. Similarly, we can think about misunderstanding or a dullness of mind that causes us to shut off from the world, if you will. Similarly, jealousy, pride, etc. There are numerous ways to describe these very destructive mental traits, emotions, if you will. Now, if we understand that the experience that we have that is other than a peaceful state of mind, an agitated state of mind, if you will, comes about through entertaining these emotions. Well, regardless of how much money we have, similarly, regardless of how many things we have, gadgets, whatever, we are unable to, at the flick of a switch, make these emotions vanish. We cannot rid ourselves of these destructive or negative mental traits just like that.
대송자 아니 가서다 semgang ribadi yarje daande shindu kechi muzi insarwa.
Accordingly, it is extremely beneficial and useful to develop the science of mind.
Semgang ribadela yang namjudo ngasola shirapje yoderwa.
To develop a science of mind, we need an understanding, right? Wisdom.
Di shirap di nyamdola, ane ngaso nyumu tandre de bi shirap zeda, ngaso semgi tingla, ane nyumu mandeli shirap za chimbuzi, ane ngaso gi mi da namju shirap khache ba ina, ta nyumu mandeli bi shirap phydu chungaji khache ya yode bari rindoa.
So this understanding, what we might call a kind of correct understanding, is often called wisdom. Now, there are various kinds of wisdom, as you can imagine. But if we really understand the kind of nature of things, this particular wisdom that people talk of developing is something that, if correctly understood, digested, if you will, something that will, in a moment, cause all of these negative states of mind, all of these destructive mental traits, if you like, those which cause us to be agitated, if you prefer, to, in the moment, lose their hold over us. Their kind of bondage, finding ourselves tied by them or under their boot, etc., is simply gone, provided, of course, we hit the spot with that understanding.
Namju ngazo midila aniji tawa jepa la zero te songza deniji shirap nyumo jena ani karzoro di ani tawa chinjilo dia jepa chinjilo dia chayugdo.
So we talk of two words, view and conduct. View can also be translated as outlook. And conduct is then simply a way of interacting with the world or with ourselves in a way. If we experience dissatisfaction and difficulty, it's because we really have a kind of, what we might say, a kind of, to use the Buddhist technical language, a wrong view. Or we're looking at things in a slightly kind of a contrary way to the way they actually are. And the same with the conduct, because the conduct is simply a reflection of our outlook or view.
De chulugi kesharimido ngaso rangji rangche so yode bazarwa.
This is the nature of things. It's nothing to do with spirituality.
Te songzanda tawa chinjiloda joba chinjiloyagi nedangde 안 지 연당으로디 간드지여레스 다 간드지르고 슬라나 탄디 가서 지 따와디 친지로 자네 아니 수수 차당 숙침부 쉬우지차 아니 가서 뭐에 니수당 숙침부 증겐 심전 탐지 너바 대화당 아니 동해 만두 버리더라 가서 겐두 갑라 아니지 미 망부지 아니 녀기 도시 미 망부지 심지 망부지 드라인 도시 심지 망부지 따뇽이 도시지 차용도 다가랑기 아니 가서 심지 출산도와.
And so, if, to use this kind of technical language, a wrong view, wrong conduct, etc. So, the question we should ask then, well, we're always going to have an outlook. We're always going to perceive the world in a particular way. So if you are suggesting that the way we are looking at it is incorrect, then can it be corrected? And what is the way of correcting it? Well, when it comes to kind of outlook or the way we perceive the world, the idea of being isolated, completely kind of independent from the world around us, is this kind of mistaken view. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we are mutually connected with the world. And so accordingly, when we consider sentient beings, as mentioned, we are all the same in that we would like to experience kind of happiness and avoid suffering. We would like comfort as opposed to discomfort and so forth. When we consider how we interact with the world at the moment, there are those who we feel particularly close to and we pull them towards us for whatever reason. Similarly, there can be those who we feel an aversion toward and we tend to avoid them at best or actively kind of push them away. Push them away at worst. So this then is the mistaken way of view, one of the mistaken ways of viewing the world, thinking that one is isolated from others.
테라 때는 차단기 로숙심보지 맞아 겐도 차단이 로숙심보지는 니레초하는 미치소가노라 강력라 주마치브서 되로와.
And so based on this idea that we're somehow independent, then we act. And based upon that action, we engage, we put ourselves in a position where we become quite miserable.
맞아기 미유더버지이나 아니 수수 낭미치도 수수 된다 뛰고 아니 배미유 자춘유 아니 텔레데니 차당 숙침보 아니 되바 대반되바이나 아니 용야 동행 바지 용대바지 다 세미나 구수도보 아니 축초주 세랑랑 초주 아니지 가르이나다 강들 지 만유바지 차디기로와.
So how does this manifest? In a way, it's something that we're all quite familiar with. So we want the best for ourselves or somebody we feel particularly close to. And based thereupon, then we kind of become a little bit kind of introverted in a way. My or our kind of happiness or well-being, comfort if you will, takes precedence over another. So therefore, I'm going to engage in particular activity that will bring about my happiness, so I believe. And we kind of, with this way of kind of self-protection or self-isolation in a way, thinking that by acting in such a way, we will have this happiness that we so desire, what happens is we kind of entertain these destructive or negative states of mind. Attachment, aversion, and so forth. Thinking that this will bring us the happiness or comfort we so desire. But what happens? Actually, it's not that. What happens is that we start to agitate the people around us. We find that our own kind of well-being is somewhat done away with. We become ill at ease, uptight, if you like, easy to anger, easy to agitate. And all of this in the name of, if you like, trying to have happiness for oneself alone.
다 시럽 뉴모지 라이기 대냠도 뉴모연조지 셈데 너주 대가서는다 마노르바 시럽디 가르저여레스 라나 아니 왜 니수 통통니 시샤 참지로 아니 띵용기 랑싱 아니 교단 리브 튠빙 아니 가솔라 장보다 님보지기 아니 리브민디야지.
And so I mentioned this development of wisdom. And so this kind of wisdom, what is it? There are various kinds of understanding. The wisdom simply means to understand, doesn't it? And so then, wisdom that we should simply try to develop, one that will naturally bring with it a sense of well-being, etc., is to simply understand the nature of things. To understand that there is nothing that is independent, rather everything is mutually dependent. Nothing is independent, everything depends upon something else. This is simply the nature of things, and it is this that we should just try to be open towards.
제자랑기 낭수당 니수인데 백견도 숙정부시고 임바제 하거나 나서 항상 차당한테 매봤으니 샘 뱀미시 자신부터 차들어와.
So there is, to use the kind of Buddhist technical language, is the way things are and the way things appear. The way things are is mutually dependent, dependently arisen, if you will. And simply then, the way they appear is somewhat other than that. So they are a little bit in discord with one another. And so it's important to then understand the way things actually are as opposed to the confused way that we tend to perceive things. If we're able to do so, then our mind, far from becoming uptight, far from becoming small, rather expands, so to speak.
Then rangi miyuina zambalin chila pendeya. Chiso chila pendeya. Ani mitsa chembo mi yengina gawo cheya. Ani suzuki le karzuru dan debuina halibi zabo. Ani semnala dejiina. Ani ji yongsu zogbaji genke tumni. Ani ji karzuru da shuk chembo lagu mare semnala kariina. Ani shang tumni. 간님바 가르즈요나 치님바 남주 가르즈임바이나 용시바레 띵중르와 네 주제 때니 만부지기 주단지 초유 토네 죽드라 만드라 드라 만드라 초완드라 만드라 두시드라 만드라 용초와리 진 셈데 hlö시 시데네 디니 용단데서 셈데 난가 난신지 데나 용단데서 아니 찜바 난신지 고 내단지 로브르바지 통그러왔어.
So to understand the way things actually are, as opposed to our misconception about things, is extremely useful. If we look at the world in general, understanding the mutually dependent nature thereof, having that kind of inner experience, what then happens is that our whole kind of being, in a way, kind of transforms. Rather than being kind of isolated, one rather opens, if you like, to the world. And along with this openness comes this a natural kind of sense of joy, of altruism, of empathy and concern for others. For within this experience, there's no longer any fear. No longer any fear in the sense that through understanding the nature of things, one's mind simply opens to that. And within that experience, well, that experience could simply be called happiness or bliss, if you will. What we've encountered at this point, or what we're experiencing, is simply the way things actually are. As I mentioned, everything, indeed, when we consider everything that we encounter. It is not anything, it is not something that is independent. No matter how it appears to us. We think about its parts or its causes and conditions, etc. We see that it is a coming together of parts, of causes and conditions, etc. And something then appears. Perhaps it appears to our eye, and we see it and we think, I like it, I don't like it, etc. But the like and the dislike no longer has any control over us, because we see the mutually dependent nature of things in its subtlest level between the subject and the object. Once we've seen that, we understand that the idea that something is inherently this or that vanishes. And what is left in its wake is this openness of mind, which is in the nature of contentment, bliss, if you will. If we use a metaphor, when the clouds kind of scatter, the sky is vast. So similarly, when the ideas of things being independent, small, over there if you like, are removed, what is left in the wake thereof is the openness of awareness.
딘리지 시럽디 아니 가지기 배주 땅와이나 아니 뺨메시 통자 친구들 할리빈 준당 친구들 와.
So if we're able to develop this understanding, this wisdom, not as a kind of intellectual pursuit, but as something subjective, we're able to have that for ourselves, then, as mentioned, our mind becomes big. This is simply the opposite of keeping it small, so to speak.
제장 ngazo zukra thero dabrze imba ina ngone je zamling khaina changmalowa perezina zamling korang denje chame nangge ingna dul chinizi 종왕이 니승안에 고 드린데가지 다 아니 샘지 지 감당 매바다 데데 나초베기 덴데 자신지기 드린데가지 통송아이나 데나지 랑기 주고 아니 데나지 랑기 셈 용수 조베게 너희 니지 통바이나 덴데 하장기 차당 제거야당 가위 아니 지 카르조르 가서 제가 나치 동행라에 저러 안 딘들라 자 지과 지과요 말했어.
Again, if we have this or develop this wisdom, the world doesn't vanish. We are still going to interact with the objects of the senses, forms, sounds, smells, taste, tactile sensation, etc. We're still going to kind of walk the earth, so to speak. When we think about the earth and the various ways that its nature appears to us, we can understand its kind of atomic or molecular structure. Similarly, we can consider the coming together of the elements in particular ways, etc. Again, through understanding the mutually dependent nature of things, we understand how certain individuals will have certain thought habits. We can understand how others who we interact with have developed particular outlooks on life, the way they view the world, etc. We understand that it's not an inherent trait that a particular person has to have, but rather it is something that has been developed. As such, we do not react to it as a thing. Rather, we simply see it as a product, something that is dependently arisen, not something that is independent, that can be simply kind of removed, because everything is interdependent. This is simply what is meant by seeing the nature of things. And by seeing said nature, again, formerly we were looking at something relatively small, but now we've removed that kind of focusing in and adhering to something existing tangibly over there. The result of that is that one's mind as mentioned, becomes vaster. When it becomes vaster, kind of metaphorically vaster obviously, within that, a sense of joy, a sense of contentment, happiness, naturally wells up. Why? Because its opposite, fear, apprehension, etc., is simply released in the moment.
Dendege ani shirap zachimbu de pecho tangswaina ani namju shedang langsada chadang ani dasha jesa ani chamri sim shum ani susula majiba yungyanda ani je kangdar ji lul nasa thakshi de la soba leyada tinji rik chamolola ani shirap de pecho tang de yungsi bare jin shedang longju chabla an khongyu ni ju tongyu de khola ningji jeya 아니 콜라 쇠바 지야다. 콜라 락삼 지야다. 딘디 인간이 남주를 로가식 도용 거로 왔어. 보라 동행기 남주들 추샤리 있나. 젠티바 있나. 이나 양디 시랍 디 배주 땅외 젠신에 디 대외 몰라. 심 고양보. 쇠바 전부 락삼 전부 닝덥 전부 점진 시비 토네 코랑시 이강에 디 시루로 왔어.
This understanding then of the nature of things is something that is extremely precious. It's something that is precious and useful to us. It is something that is precious because of its usefulness to us. How is it useful to us? Well, as I mentioned, if we look at these negative traits of mind, these destructive or disturbing, if you will, emotions, they all arise in dependence upon this fundamental distortion of reality. If we remove that distortion and we simply see things as they are, there is no longer any room for these disturbing emotions to come about. If these disturbing states of mind, negative mental traits, etc., are not in play, that which they bring about through their very nature, agitation, sadness, depression, whatever, on the physical level, blood pressure, etc., this naturally fades away. How? Because we simply understand the nature of things. For example, if we're confronted with something, whatever form that thing may take, we're able to then understand its nature. We can understand, for example, in the case of an animate individual, another person, if you will, they attack us, for example, we understand where their hostility comes from. Understanding it, we are able to see, again, mutual dependence. Through seeing this mutual dependence, the nature of things, as a byproduct, a sense of compassion, concern, altruism, naturally wells up from within. This is simply the effect of what we might call using this wisdom, seeing things through this particular outlook. And thereby, we bring about our own well-being, because to utilize this particular understanding, this wisdom, if you will, what we gain thereby for ourselves is a sense of well-being. We have this subjective experience, if you like, that has gone beyond the kind of mundane, limited way of looking at the world. And we see things in a vaster, more broader sense. This is, of course, then the correct way of using wisdom. So we can talk of wisdom concerning understanding the obvious, understanding something that is a little bit hidden, understanding something that is obvious, understanding various things.
ngaso thong la de mishi jibu wi thongandi halewi nyebor ziris ani kokgyur da ani shindu kokgyur zu de da ani maomba jachu mo ba thong ma ro was mishi jibu wi thongwa zu ta ji go na di yishi de zo che bares.
And so when it comes to the understanding of things, if you like, we can understand the obvious kind of makeup of the world, things that are obvious to us, if you like, manifest phenomena, if you will. Then there is something that is hidden, we can understand indirectly. And then there are things that are completely hidden from our ordinary way of viewing or partaking of the world.
Dendra yisemde ko ngoy ni su thoni inza sem jachim bos sem jachim bo de thong so ina ani sem de changburis.
So understanding that all of these ways that kind of things abide, obvious, slightly obscured or hidden, extremely kind of hidden, understanding that all of their nature is something that is mutually dependent, the subjective experience of that is naturally vast. This is simply then the nature of things.
Then jobadea ani be jachim bo chanlu gres.
Now, when one has this understanding,
Zangbo yende la de legres.
When one has this understanding, this wisdom, if you like, and
namju ngazo ani tsewa ningje la ya di chejen ji chadores. Ani jeje shuk chimbo jigi ko be gendu se to rugres mewa zo rugres.
So when we have this understanding, or you might say, when we put this wisdom into use, if you like, so when we understand the nature of things and we remain within that understanding without trying to kind of manipulate it, what comes from that experience? We talk of conduct. So here it's important to understand that the way we conduct ourselves, physically, verbally, and mentally, is a reflection of what we might say our innermost experience. And so if we have developed this understanding, this realization, dare I say, within us, thereby, through familiarity, the effect of that upon us will be seen through our conduct. So our conduct will, like our perception of the world, will no longer be something that is kind of, in a way, blinkered by confusion, distorted by ignorance, if you will. Rather, it will be the opposite. What does it mean when I say the opposite, the experience of wisdom? It means then the natural welling forth of compassion, concern, altruism, and so forth.
하마냠돌란 참디 침자냠돌라 제와 부바로라 제와 초보 주모바로라 제와 디 제와디 냠돌라 뉴모제와 인장코 체진리드레스 아니 가브리 메 메바마세 가브리 아니 코라 닌데 자양 차로리스 지지 찍라 응 삼데 고 윤루그레스 템보요 마레스.
So when we consider the experience, when we talk of love, compassion, concern, empathy, altruism, and so forth, all these wonderful words, we can talk about them in light of a loved one, family member, for example, between the parents and children and so forth. Similarly, we can consider that between extended family, friends, and so forth, and reaching out from that. But if this is something that is without kind of wisdom, without this understanding, it is something that is, with what we might say, kind of temporary. It's temperamental in a way. On a good day, it might be there. On another, it may not be.
근데 이게 아니 뉴모님도 여봐 이게 제와당 이치 라야디 뉴모 코랑 아니 제단기 그 짜마시바지 왜 니주단 게도 직차 인장 아니 니욕라 진이 들어왔어.
And similarly, if we talk of something that may appear to us And indeed, we may even consider ourselves as being a loving and concerned person, empathetic to the needs of whomever. However, without introspection, if we simply put on the mask of being a kind of concerned individual, it may be that because said seeming concern, love, compassion, and so forth is mixed with these destructive states of mind, addiction, obsession with whatever that may be, then by the very nature of those emotions, the experience will not be something that endures. It is something by its very nature that is disturbing and temporary.
얘는 시럽피도 중간에 표시 당와이나 아니 녀몬데 로로인 바하고 그랬어. 아니 뺨메시 거 레라오지 가르조로고 부장 링보스키에 말했어. 그 로브를 임바하거나 그 빵주여 봐도 그 매바조주 임바하고 그랬어. 내 나이 시당 더샤 내 참말로와 아니 주인 임바하고 그랬어. 아니 그 출대바 임바하고 그랬어. 내가 잠재 임바하고 그랬어. 대 내가 잠바 임바 인장 아니 시당당 아니 더샤다 디즈데 내가 잠 임바 마지 아니 거기 어디 거기 랑진데 거 temba drupte ba nyumu nak ting ji yo maris loi zeni zimba yi jing namdo yi zeni chawazi kala ngochung res.
So again, reflecting upon the mutually dependent nature of things, this understanding of the nature, if you like, of the world, of everybody who abides in it and so forth. To put this to use. What does that mean, again, on the subjective level, if we look within, using introspection and so forth? We can see that these negative mental traits, these negative states of mind, are not part and parcel of who we are. Indeed, they are not us, if you like. They are something that appear based upon our perception of something, and they appear to wish to kind of help us in a way. But when we really look at them, they're doing exactly the opposite. So, for example, in the moment we may give into kind of hostility, we may give into kind of desirous attachment, obsession about something, wishing to possess it and what have you. But these emotions, in this instance, these emotions, anger, hostility and so forth, are something temporary. Nevertheless, when they appear, we do kind of tend to think that they are something true, something that is really there, kind of tangibly, kind of a part of us in a way. But really, they are just the kind of the product of our confused mind. But the problem is, when we experience the world, and in particular when it comes to kind of ideas that we have about it, there is the habit that we've gotten over a very long period of time that when experience occurs, when emotion is in the realm of our experience, at that time we then kind of adhere to that. We kind of project a sense of autonomy onto it, and then we simply remain within that state. But the nature of things is, as I mentioned, completely the opposite. Everything is mutually dependent. There is nothing independent. The idea of independence is something man-made. It is something fabricated by the mind. And to follow it is simply then to go against the nature of things and therefore to restrict oneself.
lo chuba di peshu dang du ngazo ba mi chi shedang chagolang teni namjur ngemba teni chik zubo takju dokja a changman nang chimjang majiwa rangi lu ani karjuguru da jungji chukdeba ani ji chokwa nona ani mambo chila 쭈마도 연대 요마레스 디하고 그랬어 쭈마도 연대 매바 존인데 소리잖아 아니 랑게 남도시 찡대와 뉴몰라에 아니 셈 누르젠데 차와 송장 시럽 디게 삼노 땅와이나 안디 참말로와 삼노 코용도 아니 고 셰단한 거 말이스 아니 델라테니 닝제제 그랬어 델라테니 수바지 그랬어 남주인기 세와 디 낭지 말이스 아니 세와 디 초그리메비 세와 체메비 세와 부글라이나다 아니 소소 침상라이나다 총바 침제라이나다 안디 레갈레사이나다 자캅이나다 가리냠도 제와이나 데고 베 초리바 작 말이스 세신 작 말이스 체메와 코심 고양보 아니 셰랑기 주장도 아니 콜라닌지 차르스 아니 콘트롤라야다 딘디기 차도 렌심 데니지 심마지바 심슌바 니수가 레용도 시라 배주당도 대참말라 닌지제야 쇠바제야 학삼제야 아니 베 코르 추바 지 기닝 저우즈 통도 그랬어 딜지 착바다 셴바 민도 아카 닌제 지야 지인자네 바로 후디 아니 되샤랑데야다 바로 후디 셰당랑데야다 바로 후디 직심 누르즈 배주 제바 하고와 대가랑라 고 바로 후디라 오네 닌지제 그랬어 고 셰당 디기 코로나 맞이와서 그래 이제가 맞이와서 그래 좀젠다 데빙하네 아니 콜라닌지제 그랬어 콜 제와데 약슈레스 디 제와데 아니 민 준당 침보 런당 침보 참마지 그지 제사인다 랑게 초라리나 초바 동행이 릭스 체바이나 소소 초바 대왕 바식 차고 있을 때 캡상 쉬운 말을 했어
So we've mentioned this fabrication of autonomy, whereas the actual nature of things is kind of mutually dependent or dependently arisen. So with the idea that things exist in and of themselves is, in a way, the fundamental distortion of reality. It is the actual distorting kind of factor, if you will. And if you'd like to see, at least conceptually, how this leads to the development of destructive or negative emotion, and under the influence thereof, to action, if we consider something, regardless of what form that may take, something that we don't like perhaps, and when we perceive it and we think, I don't like that, under that influence we then start to say the reasons to ourselves, and we convince ourselves that the thing that we find unattractive about the particular object is over there. And there's nothing wrong with us pointing to it and saying, this is no good. This is bad. And I'm right to think about it in this way. And something very small becomes something very, very big. Indeed, it becomes something blown out of all proportion. And so if in the moment, through the force of familiarity, we've understood the nature of things, we understand the mutually dependent nature of things, we have that wisdom in play, if you will. We are wise through having this understanding, if you will, if you prefer. Then, when we are faced with difficulties, when we are faced with for example, somebody who is kind of aggressive towards us, or somebody who is causing us some harm or difficulty, etc., rather than reacting to that thing that we don't like and blowing it all out of proportion, thereby causing the particular scenario to increase, if we understand the nature of things, This gives us, in the moment, a very open, clear mind. We're no longer kind of focusing in on something that's not even there, reifying it, and kind of acting under its influence. Rather, in the moment, we are looking at the nature of things, and this allows our mind to remain open. Within that, we see how another person who is perhaps confronting us is focusing on something, and again, he himself or they themselves are blowing it out of all proportion. So at that moment, understanding the nature of things, we see how another, through being blinkered, or rather blinkering themselves from the nature of things, is causing their own, in the moment, mental discomfort, agitation, suffering, if you will. At that moment, it is said that a genuine compassion wells up for the first time. We talk of these words, love, concern, compassion, etc. But at that moment, when one sees how the lack of this understanding, the lack of wisdom is really that which brings about all the difficulties that each and every sentient being, regardless of their particular form, experiences, at that moment, a genuine kind of universal love, concern, and compassion arises. And we shouldn't think that this kind of love, compassion, concern, however we like to phrase it, is somewhat limited. It isn't. It is, like the wisdom itself, as I mentioned earlier, is vast, like the sky which is free of clouds. That is our experience. As this is our experience, our mind is naturally at ease, relaxed, on a very deep and fundamental level. It is at this point then, within this understanding, that no matter what the object that we perceive, no matter what we interact with, these destructive emotions which have their root in this distortion, because we've removed this distorting faculty, the distortion, if you like, we simply see reality as it is. So therefore, these disturbing emotions no longer have any hold over us. They cannot bind us any longer. When we see how others are bound through adhering to this fundamental distortion of reality, then, as I mentioned, it's at that point that a genuine compassion, altruism, patience, etc. arises. It isn't something that is mixed with a particular outlook. So, for example, as I mentioned, if you kind of mix disturbing emotions with these kind of positive states, they become, of course, temporary, but they're not genuine, and ultimately they will lead to dissatisfaction for oneself. And so accordingly then, when we consider how to kind of uproot all of these disturbing emotions, how to generate all of these positive qualities, this is something that is entirely possible simply through seeing the nature of things. And this is something that is extremely useful, don't you think?
And chuluk dramanda handa kunju chi nanda ni nanda kunju tizugi gomba nola ngasola maasunya la chiranso mikzum ani chiranso ngala rewa chesho ni chiranso deba sama kango lamni kunju suchi mido ani chiranso parcho sama chiranso kangi sama nge dogo selani suchi mido kunju tizu kanta sungsha dipa maches Dikpa sena kharse ore. Simjen la nö ma jis, yen la nö ma jis. Pemba chis. Pemba chi, yen la nö ba ma che da, chirang nondru ma che da, chirangi dribu yabu togure sungruwa. Di sungdo. Ngaso samnon di nondru zike mikzum ane gunjo chi, parcho daro si, tunjen daro chi, sena haliba ngaso kukparo. Karlis nga shira pechu madani. Kunju chigi dang 저런 시럽 해주 당고 말에 상망에 지고 송니 수지에 면도 디고 마치스 디랑나 동에 용레스 디파세나 샘젤은 뇌 마치스 젠라 뇌 마치스 젠라 뇌 지나 남지 마도 랑진끈라 초바 동에 용거래다스 젠 상망라 펜바치스 찍 많이 봐 니 많이 봐 도마 영수 쪽발라 펜바치야기 심자지 못해스 디지나 니 잡은 걸 쓰기도 왜 니즈래도 최 여름 메로 그죠 여름 메로 뭐만 근주대 시럽들이도
When we think about what we might call kind of religious traditions or spirituality in the world, there can be some ideas that within all kind of spiritual traditions, I hasten to add, that we just close our eyes, kind of look kind of in a smiley way, and we think, I'm putting my trust in something else, whatever form that may take. And we think, okay, I trust in you, and if I kind of close my eyes and I kind of act in a particularly holy way, then that will kind of purify me of everything I've done wrong. But who's doing the purification here? So this is what we might call kind of a blind faith. It's one within which kind of an understanding of things, or the development, if you like, of wisdom is not emphasized. Similarly, we may kind of read a book, and the book says, don't be bad, be good. And if you are a good person and you're not naughty, then I'll give you something special. We may act under that kind of advice, but in a way we're kind of fearing that if we step out from that advice, something bad might happen to us. So we consider then, okay, be good, do good, avoid negativity. What is meant by negativity? Harming others, somebody says to us. So don't harm others. Benefit them if you can, but at least don't harm. And be a good person. Okay. But here, there's no third party involved. This is simply the nature of things. A third party doesn't need to kind of dictate. If we understand the nature of things, we see the benefit of this.
세상 가서 남준들은 쌤들 직 틀어도 아저에 뒤에 자치 무지지 아 연수라 제마고 뜨마고 다 나랑 랑기 준당 나랑 랑지 인칭거로 할리빈 논리 좀 무슨 말해 가서 주보니 파마 쿠라기 제기도 떡은이 옌제버리 롭조니 갱갱이 제도 나랑서 가려야다 이 괜찮아 쉬어라 가서 이게 쌤이 진단데 할래비 녀크다 차버리도
And so it's important to take our time to use our faculty of human intelligence to reflect upon then the mutually dependent nature of things. We are not as independent as we might like to believe. We think of ourselves as being independent, autonomous, perhaps even existing from our own side. But it's impossible, isn't it? We think about it. In a way, it's not something that really takes much investigation. When we think of our being, the aggregation of body and mind, the body came from our parents, didn't it? Mind came from the past. So there's no independent you. And the very fact that we're able to utilize this wonderful faculty of human education or human intellect is because we have, at least on a basic level, education. That didn't come naturally, it was given to us by others. But this is the nature of things. Again, it is not something that is dictated to us. If we bother to use introspection or to just observe the world around us, we see that this is the nature of things. Yet, the troublemaker, that which causes us all the grief that we experience, if you like, is this kind of mental factor, if you like, of kind of projecting and then reifying and subsequently adhering to independence, where there's never been any independence.
Laso, dini khandar tsu duna, dini ngasuda namjundu zo tra chi ro recha sibi punzo zachi mo kare yona ko negab ji pejo danya che. Ani zachi ji zubo dia ngazo negab ji pejo danya zri. Da ke chi shu da yak shu di juwa mewa. Ani be karzo da rindang da tewa di ani shirap pyu de chunga da 닝지 pyu de chunga chanjugi sem laya di 다 ngöiwo chik nani nga su rindang che shu. Kayin se na ranga dewaan bajik, yin dewaan bajik che tumye ji, ane semba zangu laya di rindowa, nga su tsangma tika la, berzion che ya che, tika la sha ju shi na, ta yakshu yin bada.
And so when we consider the objects of the senses, things that we kind of see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and so forth, whatever form the kind of material world kind of takes, of course, we need to rely upon that. And of course, we should understand that any kind of benefit that we gain therethrough is something that is temporary. And similarly, we should, when we consider our form, our body, if you will, we should take care of our health. But it's important to understand that the objects of the senses and even our kind of body is something that is temporary. But what is really important is to develop something that is unchanging. Unchanging in the sense that it is simply the nature of things which doesn't change because it is nature. The understanding of the mutually dependent nature of things, wisdom, if you like. This wisdom that we develop when we experience it, when we start to see things in a particular way. As mentioned, what arises therewith is a sense of kind of great compassion for others. And this isn't mixed with emotion. This is something that is genuine, that arises through simply seeing the nature of things. So accordingly then we talk of bodhicitta, understanding the nature of things and that which manifests therefrom, this kind of great compassion. This, in terms of the subjective experience that we have, is something that is completely without dissatisfaction. It's what it is. The nature. It is in the nature of bliss, if you will. And this is something that arises not simply in relation to somebody and our particular perception of them, but rather universally to all sentient beings.
제가 가서디 가지고 다시 그 중고에 면도스 렌드지 셈자지 무슨 카세에 도스 셈자 치무디 카세 송아이나 추켈렌론다 말레론 되는 가서 지 로체 가리나 부구이나다 다지 쉔바리나다 겜바이나다 오늘 전에 셈이 랑신디 하고야 지야데 빼미시 계신버래도 아니 디 베레제나 다지 시럽 라야당 닝지 라야디 거의 끝나 표시 당연지로 최중장에 참마나 제바 연주들이
So to understand the nature of things is something that causes, kind of, as I mentioned, metaphorically speaking, our mind to open. And this is, or rather one's mind or one's experience, if you like, is kind of open, becomes vaster, if you will, through understanding the nature of things. It doesn't have a particular recourse to a spiritual tradition, whether one is a practitioner thereof or otherwise. It doesn't really matter. what we are trying to what we are trying to develop, what we are trying to experience, is simply the nature of our mind, how it actually is. It is extremely important, I feel, to understand the nature of mind, because it is the basis of all of our experience. And this understanding is something that everybody benefits from. Everybody can do, in a way, regardless of age. Doesn't matter if you're young, old, really doesn't matter. Understanding the nature of mind and then putting it into practice is extremely important.
So kom na la na meba ngoi te khaya yo mai sung do te nam jin do nga da ji nyomo thusum la khom che tha ni ten ji sem zang bu chang bu ti ji de lam sang bi ji dong tu yo ma ba te sung jang sem zang bu chang bu ti ji de kale ka khom ji dang khom ji na ne ngoi ni ji de za chen bu ze xie song ai na ani ju ba ta ya de ko ta le lo re la na ta han ba cha wo re ma do ji 강달 오네 추탐지 띵중이 비니스용하네 삼노다나 산지 좀 된디기 아니 로닌도 갑지 공을 송연주기 띵중이 대 코나니 송연디 되네 마스기 아니지 가르쳐오르다 샘제지 남도당 다 차당디 아니 매바지 다랑이 띵중이 대 코나니 전 시에서와이나 차당이 로 용수도가 식주기도 차당이 로디 띵중기 니수잉안에 최탐지 에너지 전제리 니수 뜨주비 니수 체뜨 댄수밍안에 아니 장년 저한테 샷대야마도 아니 그런 덴바주가 들자매비 토네 ngaso디 류라이나 게도고레 나도고레 시도고레 제도고레 야 차림고레 마 귀도고레 데 상문 띵중 뚜두비니 수 인자 중대고레 중사고란 띵지 뚜두비니 수 인자네 랑시메바 끼치끼치끼치끼치 저도고레 데 송장 심 작바티스 릭티스데야 셈제 남네 산제데 연자 로브 치메집 치마 데세 산지니 송은디 로브지 아니 가서기 주제 초발에 때니 남도 되지 릭드지 아니 치마 라야다 니 로브르바 이리 슬라야다 세미 랑신 줘야 돼 가서기 랑주 다지 가져르고 코랑이 모함 코랑이 남바 디 아니 베데 요세바 치마다 아니 데롱 마임바 뒤다 남바 근도 다 덴지 자치무지 모주 지용도 대양 ngoi ni chu ngoi ko ran kang ngoi ni chu yo ba de ngoi chu chi yo ye zane nga zo ta ji chuluk je na di nga su gi dong e man de ba da de ban de ba ji sem ji yong su zo ba la ge go yo ba ji ko ya ji no bu ji ri de do dong e ye za wa di marik ba dang ji marik ba ri de do wa marik ba na ne ya ta 가르쳐로 다 니루글로 몬데바 시샤 꾼라 마리바세나 고고인니스 마토니 다 릭바 예시세나 강 여바데 고인니스 통데바 실로이 유창마 강 여바 코랑 고인니스 가리 낭 세미니스 강 이바 고인니스 통데바 디 고인니스 인가니 아니 지지라 조진라 때니 티 댄숨 중지 차라기 니스응하니 들 차라 진이 니스응하니 카도 입 진이 니스응하니 되니 지 가르쳐 거다 주소 장보여나 되니 소와 대와 주소 냠바사노 소와 동에 나야 되고 랑지 좀젠지래도 대 할래와 된데 니스응하니 삼는 당와이나 아니 가서 미 장보다 장보 잠을링데 아니지 시디 랑가라 로야라 아니 할리비지 가져로다 시샤 자치무지 통서와
Now, it is important to understand that this understanding of the nature of things is possible. It may be that we perhaps feel, I understand this possibility, it's a little bit too difficult for me. And it's important, if we feel so, to understand why. In a way, when we consider ourselves, we are, each and every one of us, individuals who are very familiar with kind of giving into emotion, giving into negative mental traits, and most importantly, giving into this kind of distortion of reality, this kind of projection of autonomy, subsequent reification and adherence or grasping thereupon. So it's important to remind ourselves again and again that everything, all phenomena, if you like, everything is mutually dependent. It is dependently arisen, and it abides as something that is. It is dependently arisen, and it abides as something that is mutually dependent. This is then the nature of things. When we talk of the Buddha, Buddha means somebody who is awake. The Buddha is awake to the nature of things. And the Buddha's teaching fundamentally revolves around understanding the mutually dependent nature of things. Suchness, if you like. The way of things, if you prefer. This is what the Buddha realized. This is what caused the awakening, if you like, of Buddha. And this is then what the Buddha revealed in his teaching. So it is important to understand that no matter how real, independent, tangible even, these destructive states of mind are, obsession, desirous attachment, aversion, anger, hostility, etc. They are, in and of themselves, there because of various factors, wholesome or otherwise. When we consider everything, it is simply the effect of the coming together of inconceivable causes and conditions. And it's important that we reflect upon this. In the moment, indeed, in a very kind of crass way of looking at things, experience is momentary. It will pass. It's the changing nature of things that we all understand, even if we don't admit it to ourselves. And the reason things are momentary is because things are mutually dependent. They are not independent. We can understand this on a coarse level of our interaction with objects which we relate to through the sense doors. When we understand the mutual dependence of an experience that comes about through our seeing a particular object, for example, we understand that on a rough level, a coarse level, if you like. But it's important to then relate that to mind itself, or to consciousness, if you will. There is a famous citation that I'll read. I'll relate to you rather. All sentient beings are awake. What does that mean? All sentient beings are Buddha. But they don't realize they are Buddha. Why? Because they are under the influence of these obscuring factors, disturbing emotions, negative states of mind, negative mental traits, habitual tendencies, etc., all of which have come about through this distortion of reality. Accordingly, if we remove the obscuring factor, when we see the nature of things as it is, that is the meaning of Buddha. So this is an extremely important kind of introduction. We can say, an introduction to the nature of things, introduction to the nature of mind, if you will. Here, when we consider all sentient beings wish to be happy, all sentient beings wish to be free of suffering, discomfort, dissatisfaction, etc. It is important for us to consider, in light of the understanding of mutual dependence, what brings about this suffering or this dissatisfaction, this discomfort that we experience. It is based upon a habit of entertaining these negative or destructive states of mind. These negative or destructive states of mind find their cause in this fundamental distortion of reality that we often call ignorance. Ignorance here then simply means to misinterpret, to misunderstand the nature of things. So if we correct our understanding, if we remove this distorting factor, by removing it, what we have in place of this fundamental distortion of reality or ignorance is wisdom, an understanding of the nature of things. With that, there is no longer any bed, if you like, from which the kind of seeds of disturbing emotion can emerge. And so it's important then to become familiar with the natural state, the nature of things. This is in and of itself referred to as kind of Ripa Yeshi in Tibetan, which means then this kind of fundamental understanding of awareness. This fundamental understanding which is in and of itself the innermost subtle nature of experience. And it, in and of itself, is awake. It is just that we don't recognize its awakened nature is obscured by our entertaining through familiarity these destructive or disturbing, distorting, if you will, states of mind. And so it is important then that it should be wish to be free of discomfort. If we would like to have kind of peace of mind, both temporarily and ultimately to awaken, what we need to develop within ourselves is simply a familiarity with the nature of things. To avoid blindly, in a way, adhering to these destructive states of mind and thereby bringing about the dissatisfaction that we experience and that ultimately we would like to be free of. And so accordingly, when we talk of peace, peace is a subjective experience, and it comes about simply through understanding the nature of things.
So, then diri dangazo shirap pyu chungwa ninji pyu chungwa ji tamshi chenyin phebe phamo chungjung ji gi tamshi chewa de na chena ma sinzik chenyin de la chonghan la yoba tang an chilo ni senyin changmang lo la gatin che jwayi thakwato la da Jamyang Center da dini da chulu zi riks ma chiwa peje ani naga go cha yusari an chena ma so khotri da ani 잡종 아니 삼지 미쳐가 지샤 창문 투지시 아니 시럽다 닌지기 드링디 안가서 삼지 미쳐가지 가르주고다 손놈 집으로서 차리 디기 아니 지 가르주고다 님발라난다 안 디기 좀제 라와 있는다 디 창문으로 아니 점리 덴지 지부탐바 아니 점링 끊나다 핀도 제니지 지부탐바 창문으로 고치 때야 당 니묵축스 지바단 안지 심진군 장바다 제벨로 줄지야 몰람 지르지 아니 정말로 다시 될래 투지체 고체리.
And so we've been speaking about kind of wisdom a lot, and through understanding of the nature of things, which will designate wisdom. Therethrough comes great compassion, and thereby peace. And so I'd like to thank you, all of you who are gathered here in the room, and also all of you who are gathered around the world via Zoom. Thank you all for your interest in the development of this understanding or kind of wisdom. And in particular, the event here today was organized, as mentioned at the beginning, by 9 different Buddhist groups. So I'd like to thank you for your mutual kind of cooperation, bringing about this event. And as we've been talking about kind of wisdom and compassion, the subjective experience of peace, etc., I'm sure that hereby we've gathered a huge amount of positive potential or merit. And I would like to now, for all of us, to dedicate this to all sentient beings throughout the world. That kind of conflicts may end. And conflicts always begin with a misunderstanding, so that misunderstanding ends. And that everybody, through understanding the nature of things, develops a genuine kind of appreciation for an altruistic concern for others. And so let us dedicate then the merit of our time together. And thank you very much. Tashidele.
In the word of the Gajur Nananda, Gelonshonla, Kinzi Zangsum, one in Tajibure, Gatinche, and Jinda Gajur was of Samala, Gatinche, Tashidele. Thank you.
So thank all of you once again.
Om benza bhumi ahom wan chen se shi sa shi om benza reki ahom chi chakri ko yugi ko we utsuri galpori rab shalu papo lo samboling New balance Chandra minyen ludan lupa nayadan nayakshin yudan dan lam chodro draminyen dan draminyen gira harimpoche ri wo pa samgi shing de ba mamo pa yelo to kolorimpoche no borim Poche, Sunmarim Poche, Lomborim Poche, Lamporim Poche, Tachorim Poche, Maporim Poche, Techempoi Bompai, Gierma, Tringwama, Luma, Gama, Metobma, Dupoma, Nanselma, Drichapma, Nima, Rinpoche de Chirla Nampa Gelwa Gelsen Utsuladan mi Peljo Punsum Supa Matsamwa me Pasang Jingi Du Angwa Dida Drinchen Sawa Dangyepa Chepe Pelden Lama Dampanyam Dankepa Duyang Yonzon Tumpe Gyada Dongi Le Du Senyu Me Tu Jetsun Lama Losa Tubuando Je Chan Chimpo Kyapche Ranjud Nel Joma Khandro Tseringma Rinpoche Pelzam Poje Nye Te Pa Chimpo Jonju Zamele Pa Jiwe Yundu Shinkamo Wagyu Tuje Drowe Dundu Shesu So Jenye Kyamdatso Drowa Makyu Nam Ke Tadanyam Pesem Chentam Chela Tutse Wajem Pogyo Ne Jinji Laptu Sol Saji Pegi Joshi Metok Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Padi Sam ge xing du mik te wai dro kun nam da xing la Chö pa shoi jie tsun la mei ko se ra tin ching nam ka trin lei chö ge padang lo sang ten pe dran me sa som gi dro e mon sel ta tu en ye gu chi gi dam guru ratna mindala kaniratayami Dagi jinye sepe ge wadi tentan droa kun la gang pendang kepa jitsan lo san drapa yi tempe nimpor indu tsao je shok gadi ra we ko we jinkam di pendan de wa ma lu shung we ni chen rei se wan tenzin gyat so yi ja pe si te padu tengyu chik da me tun pe gyal se nyen rang so lo sang gel wa yap se gu pa che rab jang gel shingi kya yul ma lu pe den de mun pa dru pe gele so yu su pe tu ten rinpoche sha dan dru pe zin jin pel wala naya mi son su pe gu che chen sun mei che tsun lama sulwa dip pende ma lu jong wei gu ji bu ge wei ten dam ma gu dru wa yi dun la chu tu sun pa sim pe mu lu ba shi wa shi di re pang on tan chu sang ge se jin la dang gel se nam ki tu ke la po che lu me den pe yan tu se pe sun kal san tu je pe du nyu je shuk. For the sake of caring for the unfortunate ones born at the end of this degenerate age, O Venerable Tara, your Buddha activities manifest as the worldly actions of a noble queen. May you have long life, and may we pray that your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Your fame is renowned throughout the three realms. Freed from the sufferings of the lower realms, you have attained the enlightenment of the Shravakas. O Tashi Tseringma, you who gave the great bliss of the Dharmakaya to the noble Milarepa, while acting as his companion and knowledge lady, may you have long life, and may your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. To you we pray. Please grant us your blessings. May we take this crest from our hearts. Countless dakinis, bless the channels, constituents and bodhicitta of the living beings of this degenerate age, leading these beings to the great bliss which arises upon attaining the subtle completion stage. You establish them in the supreme state of the Dharmakaya. O Khandro Bumki Soma, may you have long life, and we pray that your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Under the influence of others, we beings have followed the illusion of true existence in all our lives throughout beginningless time, holding every deluded appearance to be true. We have been tormented by samsara's ocean of suffering until right now. The wisdom of seeing everything as empty of true existence is the highest wisdom. O damsel Droma, may you have long life, and when we pray, your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. However difficult it is to tame us miserable beings bound by karma and the afflictions, your patience and compassion has grown that strong. O Venerable Lady Dagmema, sublime and holy secret mother of Lama Mapa, may you have long life and may your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. With respect, we make this request from our hearts. You bless Pambasambhava, the great Indian Pandit, who was filled with kindness towards Tibet. May that true Dharma which puts an end to the 84,000 afflictions, like the rays of the sun, fill the whole world with the great kindness. O Supreme Yeshe Tsogyal, who acted as his companion in the great bliss, may you have long life and may your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. To you we pray, please grant us your blessings. Janchu Samchu Rinpoche, Make Panam Kegyuchi, Kepa Nyampa Mepaye, Gongne Gongdu Palwa Shuk, Doni Tawa Rinpoche, Make Panam Kegyuchi, Kepa Nyampa Mepaye, Gongne Gongdu Palwa Shuk, Kewa Kuntu Yandan Lamadan, Drame Chuki Pela Lonchuchin, Saran Lange and then Rapsunye, Doje Changi Gyopan Yutu Sho.
Rinpoche, thank you so much on behalf of all of the organizing Dharma centers and everybody here, both here and online. Thank you so much for coming to visit us again and give us these incredibly profound teachings. And also thank you so much for your continual inspiration, guidance, and encouragement on the path. And I would also like to wish you well for all your projects and activities, in particular your upcoming trip to the US and also the construction and establishment of your temple in Nepal. Please live long and come again to teach us many, many more times. Thank you. And also I'd like to thank our outstanding translator, Venerable Sean Price. Listening to his translation is like... Listening to his translation is like Rinpoche speaking to us directly. Thank you.
Thank you.